Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Charles Freedman radio program. 3 hours of news talk, 9 to noon every weekday. Relax, pour that second cup of coffee, and get ready to participate in the conversation. And, of course, if you're going to participate, you got to know how. Well, I don't mean you got to know how to talk. I'm sure you're already quite aware of that. You got to know how to hook up. You need the phone number. 831-265-5050 is the number. 265-5050. Call in, make your voice heard. We would love to hear from you. Well, I'm going to paraphrase Gabriel Heater today. Instead of saying, ah, yes, there's good news, I'm going to say, ah, yes, there's big news. I've got to admit, I never dreamed, regardless of, his successes, and there have been some, and his, sometimes rather banal stunts, it never occurred to me that we would one day be referring to Donald Trump as a statesman. Today, honest people, objective people, have to say, he's moving in that sphere. I'm reminded a few years ago, President Obama received a Nobel Peace Prize. And he'd hardly taken office. He hadn't done a damn thing. But they gave him a Nobel Peace Prize. This was the premium award I've ever seen for just showing up. Mr. Trump has actually compiled a record now of resolving conflicts. He takes credit for some of the lower profile conflicts that he has resolved. I say lower profile. Any conflict in which people are fighting and dying is worth resolving. But of course, the two marquee conflicts going on right now are the Russian-Ukraine war and the Israel campaign against Hamas. Those are the big ones. We have been waiting. I talked a little bit about, on yesterday's program, about the program, the proposal that Mr. Trump was going to make. He was going to invite Benjamin Netanyahu to the White House to discuss it with him. And at that point, the ball would be in Netanyahu's court. Would he accept or reject? Well, he accepted. And as I will delineate presently, there are some things in this agreement that are hard pills for Netanyahu to swallow. But Trump understands, and he understands, in order to get something done, each side has to be willing to give up something. But there are certain things that Mr. Trump, in his proposal, did not give up. He kept his eye firmly focused on the real imperatives. Let's examine this a bit. When will the Gaza war end? The answer remains when Hamas releases the hostages, lays down arms, and gives up power. Now, this is what we've been talking about here for, months. These are the core demands of the deal President Trump put on the table and that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu agreed to yesterday. President Trump called Monday potentially one of the greatest days in civilization. He's never given to understatement, is he? Quests to solve the Middle East typically end in disappointment. You remember what happened to poor Bill Clinton when he tried back in 2000. We've told that story on this program many, many times. But that was an attempt to work out a two-state solution. Turned out that Yasser Arafat and the PLO didn't want a two-state solution. And when one was offered to them, they walked away from it. The Trump deal is better understood as a way to move the region past the Gaza war and shift pressure onto Hamas. This is what's known as statesmanship, and that is why I offered that accolade to Mr. Trump a few minutes ago. After a modest Israeli withdrawal, the deal requires Hamas to free all 48 hostages, the quick and the dead, within 72 hours of acceptance. In exchange, what does Israel give up? Well, this is considerable. There are 1,700 Gazans who have been detained since the start of the war, as well as 250 convicted terrorists that are serving life sentences for killing Israelis. These are convicted murderers. And they're to be released. That is 1,950 bad actors released for 20 live and 28 dead Israeli hostages. I think a reasonable description of that deal would be lopsided. Israel has made such deals before. They have demonstrated time and again they value their people that highly. They're willing to make these outrageously out-of-balance trades in order to get hostages back. They're called upon to do so once again. Mr. Netanyahu said yes. Bear in mind that the big reason I'm talking about this today is because not only did Mr. Trump lay this plan out, but Prime Minister Netanyahu has accepted it. The evil Bibi Netanyahu has looked at this, gritted his teeth, and said, yes, this we will do. Now, will Hamas? If they do, the war would halt. Aid could surge. Israel would gradually withdraw from Gaza in accordance with Hamas disarmament. A stabilization force led by Arab states would take over Gaza in phases. And a committee of Palestinian technocrats supervised by a board of peace chaired by President Trump would handle civil administration. Now, I don't know where he's going to find the time for that. I've heard that former British Prime Minister Tony Blair would have a prominent role in this. Not a bad idea. But the idea that Mr. Trump is going to micromanage Gaza while he's attempting to be President of the United States of America doesn't seem reasonable to me. Just saying. Gaza would undergo a program of de-radicalization. That might take a minute or two. All Gazans would be allowed to stay, leave, or return later. Hamas members who disarm would be granted amnesty to leave Gaza, would either be granted amnesty or leave Gaza. Hamas would have no role in governance. I'm hearing that Hamas wants to get this done too, Trump said. But there's ample reason for skepticism. Hamas needs the hostages to manipulate the Israelis. It needs weapons to stay relevant. Even under Qatari pressure, which U.S. officials believe was generated at last by Israel's September 9th strike in Doha, Hamas is unlikely to surrender all of its leverage up front. About that strike against Qatar, one of the things that President Trump did yesterday was prevail upon Bibi Netanyahu to make a telephone call to the Qatari government and in person apologize for that operation and furthermore guarantee that it won't be repeated. I can hear some of you who are skeptics saying, oh, big deal. Well, yeah, this is a big deal. In diplomatic terms, this is known as eating crow. And Mr. Trump dished up a portion of it, and Benjamin Netanyahu choked it down. Now, this is the kind of thing, call it symbolism if you will, but nevertheless, these symbols speak a diplomatic language. The Qataris will now be much more inclined to act in what is objectively their own best interest. I mean, after all, if you're going to enter into alliance with somebody, who would you rather ally with, Israel or Hamas? I mean, think about it in terms of, what are you going to do for me? What can Hamas do for anybody? All there is a bunch of terrorists. They don't create anything. There's no upside to an alliance with Hamas. On the other hand, Israel is a dynamic, innovative, forward-looking country. Dealing with them, the opportunities for improvement in basic living standards, they're obvious. So when I say that Qatar is seeking its own rational self-interest in allying with or aligning with Israel, all I'm doing is stating obvious fact. The alternative is, in this particular case, essentially zero or even negative. The deal then rests on a hopeful fiction. More relevant is what happens if the fiction is dispelled and Hamas clings to some or all of its hostages and arms. In that event, so there's the carrot and the stick. The plan is for Israel, the deal to proceed in the areas of Gaza under Israeli control. Arab states would build the government to replace Hamas authority in Gaza, even as Israel prosecutes the war. Hamas could possibly see this as the worst of both possible worlds. So, essentially, this kind of reminds me of what President Trump did with Vladimir Putin a few months ago. He was offering him, hey, why don't you end this war and look what we can do. We can end sanctions on Russia. We can enter into all kinds of economic development projects, etc. There were real carrots there. But Mr. Putin was not interested. And over the past few months, by essentially shining Mr. Trump on, you see, Putin was dishonest. Oh, yeah, that sounds good. Oh, yeah, that sounds good. And the next thing you know, he's blowing up another hospital. I think he succeeded in irritating President Trump, which my guess is might turn out later on to be not too smart. But if there's one thing in both Ukraine, Israel, and other areas, Donald Trump is proving himself to be an extraordinarily patient man. Now, I've talked about this before, but again, I'm going to lay it on the table. This is a fellow who is not prone to fly off the handle or go off half-cocked. Quite the contrary. He is restrained, and then he is restrained, and after that, he is still restrained. He's willing to wait and wait and wait and continue to offer blandishments, sweet talk, whatever you want to call it, in an attempt to convince people, hey, please, come this way. This is the way we want to go. Here, kitty, 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 kitty. And only when all of that has finally and absolutely come to naught is he willing to pull the switch, viz. What he did with Iran. Now, the action that he took in Iran will possibly bear fruit. When Hamas receives this, they have received it. The Qataris have communicated Mr. Trump's 20 points to Hamas. And I'm sure Hamas is also aware that their interlocutor, the Israeli government, has accepted these 20 points. Now, Hamas, being a terrorist organization dedicated to killing over anything else. And there's going to be a lot of sentiment among Hamas leaders to say, no, don't do this. We have hostages. We have weapons. We can still make all kinds of trouble. There may be a few among them, and maybe more all the time, who are saying, wait a minute. Yes, we hate, and yes, we want to kill, but we're coming up against the limits of our capabilities. Look what happened to the Ayatollah when he tested Donald Trump too far. He got his toys taken away from him. All his atomic toys are gone. Because he did not understand that there is a point beyond which you do not push President Trump. It's a far point. I'll admit, farther than it would have been with me. And for that, I admit, I admire restraint and patience. Maybe I should have more. But at length, Mr. Trump has demonstrated that sooner or later, no more nice guy. So will Hamas accept this deal? Goodness gracious. I have no idea. I sure hope so. On this program for a long time, any of my listeners understands, you want peace right away? Release the hostages, there's instant peace. Trump could have done that any time over the past couple of years. Or Trump, rather. The Hamas could have done that any time over the last couple of years. The imperative in Israeli politics, and remember, Israel's a democracy. In Israeli politics and among the Israeli people, the imperative for some time now has been the return of the hostages. That is what the IDF has been fighting for. So Hamas cries for peace and a ceasefire, but the one thing that they could do to secure it, they refuse to do. And get this, the world sympathizes with them. Go figure. Israel would have full backing from the U.S. to finish the job if Hamas rejects the deal, or if the Arab states are unable to disarm Hamas. The key for peace is ending the threat from this terror agent. Mr. Trump has offered Israel a potential end to its war, a plan embraced by regional Arab powers. Mr. Trump has done his homework. He has engaged the Egyptians. He has engaged the Saudis. He's engaged the Qataris. Since he came to office this second time, he has been actively courting and dealing with these other Arab governments, establishing, dare I say, cordial relations? Certainly upgrading and improving the relationship between the United States of America and these other Arab states. There are many reasons for doing that, a lot of them economic, but in this particular case it's political. They can be very helpful in moving the fulcrum on such negotiations. To have Hamas listening to Americans and Israelis telling it, well, this is something you got to do. That's one thing. But when it comes from fellow Muslims, fellow Arabs, hey, this is something you got to do. That is entirely another thing. It does make a difference. Benjamin Netanyahu, he can boast of victories over Iran and Hezbollah. now has his day after plan for Gaza. With Israel's war aims satisfied, this can help him restore Israel's international position and move him to improve it by expanding the Abraham Accords. The one thing I have not heard here yet, I've heard people talk about, what's going to happen with Gaza? Well, not Hamas, but possibly that and the West Bank, run by a, quote, reformed, unquote, Palestinian Authority. And what would these reforms require? Well, for one thing, they'd have to hold elections. They haven't held any elections in 20 years. Abu Mazen became head of the PA back in 2005, right after Yasser Arafat finally removed himself to the nether regions, taking his billions with him. So they held an election. This guy becomes head of the PA. He's supposed to have a 4-year term. That was 20 years ago. And unlike the predictions for George W. Bush, Barack Obama, Donald Trump, etc., every 4 years we hear, oh, there's never going to be another election. Well, in the Palestinian Authority, that has come true. One man, one vote, one time. Abbas gets elected head of the PA, and that's it. He holds the office for life, even though he's only got a 4-year term. Well, now he's up in his mid-80s. Maybe he would step aside. Maybe he would kindly die. I mean, that's how these guys finally check out. You know, that's how Yasser Arafat checked out. But really, the face of the PA is not what is important. In order to, quote, reform, unquote, it seems to me that only one thing needs to be done. The Palestinian Authority must amend its charter to accept a two-state solution with Israel. Now, the world, the French, the British, the Canadians, the Australians, all these people who are actually supposed to be pillars of Western civilization, they're all rushing now to recognize a Palestinian state, which doesn't even exist. And they're laggards. Oh, something like, what's the UN have? 190 members. 150 countries have already recognized a Palestinian state. There's a Palestinian representative of the United Nations. They got no state. They got no government. They got bupkis. Why? Because they will not agree to a two-state solution. So far as the Palestinians are concerned, Israel is a fiction. Israel must go away. Hamas are the most obdurate about it. They're actually using force to try to accomplish this. But the rest of them all have it in their basic governing documents, and it's part of their negotiative. No Israel. Can't have Israel. That's just not what's going on. So regardless of what other reforms Palestinian Authority might undertake, the key one, the one that would really matter, is for them to recognize the legitimacy and the right to exist of the State of Israel. That's how Anwar Sadat and Menachem Begin made peace at Camp David back in 1979. Up until that point, Egypt had not recognized Israel as a legitimate state. Therefore, of course, they made war again and again and again to try to wipe it off the map. But then they changed that one thing. Yes, we recognize that Israel is a nation. We recognize its territory. We recognize its government. We're sending ambassadors. We accept ambassadors. They establish diplomatic relations, like normal countries do. And since that time, Israel and Egypt have not fought a war. Not once. And they came every few years. It was just like turning off a switch. Boom. This is what the Palestinian Authority must do. The same thing the Jordanians and the Egyptians have already long since done. Simply recognize established fact. After all, Israel does exist, doesn't it? I'm not saying you have to like that or even be happy about it, but it's real. This is the reform that refreshes. Pardon me, Coca-Cola. Some parts of the deal could pose challenges for Israel. One's a spot for the West Bank-based Palestinian Authority on the committee to govern Gaza. Arab states insist on it to give their intervention legitimacy, but the deal says the PA will take up its role only after it de-radicalizes and makes stringent reforms laid out by Mr. Trump. This is what I've just been discussing. If the Palestinian Authority does not complete the reforms, they'll have only themselves to blame, Mr. Trump said. If it does reform, all the better for Israel and peace. Another is the proposal's aspiration. The PA reforms, this might be yield the right to conditions for a pathway to Palestinian statehood. To talk about statehood after the Hamas massacre sounds suicidal to Israelis. Mr. Trump said he understands this, but at the level of distant aspiration, it need not hold up progress today. A third issue, reconstruction of Gaza, which is supposed to start immediately. If it can't be another United Nations or Qatar-led restoration that supplied Hamas and spawned war after war. This is an opportunity to end the anomaly of permanent Palestinian refugee camps and anti-Semitic indoctrination. That leaves the Israeli phased withdrawal, which is linked to the extent of Hamas disarmament. Bibi Netanyahu said Israel would also keep a security buffer zone for what he called the foreseeable future. These are crucial conditions because whatever fine words are offered, only Israelis will fight Hamas to keep Israel safe. The more Israel is able to carry out security operations against Hamas going forward, the less likely we are to see another war. Credit to Mr. Trump for winning regional buy-in for a deal that recognizes this. So the Wall Street Journal editorial board joins me in offering applause to President Trump for this not only a good try, but a well-thought-out, well-planned, and well-orchestrated try. Mr. Trump has, in the old phrase, he has placed his ducks carefully in a row. He's not simply thrown this peace plan out there and said, hey, doesn't this look good? No. There's been serious advance work done. The ball is now firmly in Hamas court. I'm hoping they accept. I mean, I don't like the idea of them getting amnesty. I don't like the idea of their murderers being released from prison and given essentially a get-out-of-jail-free card. I don't like that. But am I willing to pay that price for having Hamas uprooted from Gaza and getting the hostages back? Oh, yeah. Yeah. That's enough to make it worthwhile, I think. What do you think? Call me up and tell me. 831-265-5050 is the number. I will be back in 2 minutes.
It's high time to celebrate the opening of the new Hook Outlet Dispensary, 1129 Mission in Santa Cruz. Get in on the opening fun and really low prices on the Hook's unmatched selection of top-quality medical and recreational cannabis flower, vapes, drinks, gummies, and concentrates. The Hook Outlet is now the West Side's source for finest cannabis at the lowest prices. Get in on all the opening fun and low prices at the all-new Hook Outlet. HookOutlet.com for details and deals.
If you turned 65 recently like me, it's important you find a Medicare Advantage plan that gives you the coverage you're looking for. But finding one can be difficult. The best thing I did, and I suggest you do the same, is call a licensed insurance agent and let them walk you through your Medicare Advantage plan options. There are so many benefits you have access to, so make the call now and let the representatives explain everything to you. Our licensed insurance agents can offer you a variety of Medicare Advantage plans. Plus, the call is free, the information is free, and there's no obligation to enroll. We're here to make it easy for you to select a Medicare Advantage plan that may work for your needs. Finding a Medicare Advantage plan can be easy if you do what I did. Make a quick call right now to learn more. Thank you.
800-850-5360. 800-850-5360. 800-850-5360. That's 800-850-5360.
Attention content producers. You can have access to a complete digital media production facility at Satellite Co-working and Digital Media Studio on Soquel Avenue. Easily rent video and audio equipment, a studio with green screen, editing suite, and audio booth, all at can't say no rates. Schedule a tour to see for yourself at satellitecoworking.com. Mention Santa Cruz Voice for 20% off your first reservation.
At 9:37, we have our first telephone call. Evan's on the line. Let's find out what's on his mind this lovely Tuesday morning. Hello, sir.
Well, you asked the question what people are wondering about your whole segment, and I find it kind of complex, so I'd like to maybe try to dive into a local things that are kind of interesting this morning. Lookout Santa Cruz, I'd like to kind of go on and just see what their headlines are. Cabrillo College, UCSC break ground on joint housing project after last-minute deal to save state funding. Your thoughts, sir?
Well, I don't know anything about this except what you've just told me, so I really can't say that much. You say who? UCSC and who? Cabrillo College?
Yeah, I guess Cabrillo College technically is, and your morning show, people were talking about that too, and kind of interesting that it had the headline up here too. So I figured I'd put that out here for you as well. I guess they're going to do it over there by somewhere over by the church over on the left over there. I'm not 100% sure on where the project is, but over by Cabrillo. But
see, unfortunately, that was what I was going to ask. The church over on the left is rather well. It's not something I can grab hold of. Are we talking about? Let me see. As I recall, I'm trying to remember Cabrillo College, the lay of the land there. As I recall, there is a church on the west side, the Santa Cruz side of Cabrillo College. So are you telling me that, what, are they going to tear the church down and build a slum? Or
no. I think it's probably going to be on Cabrillo, I'm guessing, because, but I doubt they're going to be tearing down that church. That's a pretty popular church over there. My mind's blanking for the church name, but anyway, 624 beds, I guess. Cabrillo Aptos campus,
well,
by fall 2027, sir.
Hold it. 624 beds. Now, that doesn't sound like housing. That sounds more like a barracks. So is this going to be a human warehouse, or is this going to be apartments, or kind of like an old motel with individual units? What are we talking about here?
What I'm reading here, multi-story housing complex with 4-bedroom apartments, mini kitchenettes, shared
Multi-story
bathrooms.
housing complex. That conjures images of Soviet-style blocks, cinder blocks with, I don't know. Again,
It sounds like the prison units they're opening up on Pacific Avenue. You kind of look up at the wall of that apartment complex, and it looks like prison windows. It's like, oh my God, it's like ridiculous. Probably going to be small too,
Santa Cruz
for sure. But
Santa Cruz has traditionally been a place where people come for recreation. It's been a tourist town since long before anything else. If Santa Cruz decides to destroy its ambiance by building architectural monstrosities, then I think what they're doing is throwing away what has traditionally been one of their biggest sources of prosperity. Santa Cruz, if it's a visitor town, you make it less hospitable, less attractive. Fewer visitors will come. Maybe they're betting that the beaches will draw people, even if the first thing they see coming off the beach is some kind of enclave. But I don't know. Again, I hesitate to comment on all of this because I'm operating from a lack of knowledge. I don't read Lookout Santa Cruz. Santa Cruz should have been looking out years ago. It's too late now. So, I make jokes about if you go to Santa Cruz, you need a passport and a visa because you're leaving the United States. And people laugh at those jokes because they understand them, because they're funny, because they actually have, a basis in perceived reality. So, I don't know.
Now, a question real quick, because I know you're you used to be a school teacher, or were you a substitute?
Anyway, what's your question?
Question is main question. Granted, do you think this town was kind of screwed when they built the UC campus, and Cabrillo as well?
I have always felt that the biggest mistake Santa Cruz ever made was inviting the University of California. Now, at the time, this was regarded as a tremendous boon. The city administration of Santa Cruz, which was at that time dominated by political conservatives, and Santa Cruz had always been a Republican town, and they saw a university campus in essentially the terms of a generation or two generations earlier. This would be a place where the sons and daughters of the wealthy would come, and they would spend money in the local stores, and they would raise the intellectual level of the town, etc., having a college in town. This is a great thing, and Santa Cruz fought hard for that. They worked to get that campus brought to Santa Cruz, and when it was announced that Santa Cruz would be receiving it, there was much glee and huzzah, and those very same people, only a few years later, were weeping bitter tears of agony because that which they had worked so hard for proved instead to be something that they hadn't foreseen at all. Even at that time, an enclave of radical leftism. They were the sons and daughters of the very wealthy, but the sons and daughters of the very wealthy by this time were people who felt entitled, and essentially, the Dr. Spock generation, whose parents had not offered them the kind of discipline and guidance that parents had traditionally offered. And so they go to Santa Cruz. What do? They go to this university where they have co-ed dormitories. I mean, if you're expecting students, the idea of studies, academic enterprise, if you were expecting people in their age 19, 20, etc., to pay any attention at all to academic activities, you don't have them living and showering together, because that's not the way biology works. That, and the fact that, of course, drugs, and particularly marijuana, was absolutely pervasive. I mean, it was essentially, it led to a change in the community of Santa Cruz that was permanent, irreversible, and unfortunate.
Well, last thing real quick before I leave you, I'd like to just kind of mention, I guess, Capitola, first female police chief. Kind of interesting. I'm hoping she gets that police force and gets them trained a little bit better. I'm not a fan of their policing by any means, but that's just my opinion. But kind of interesting, though, at the same time. Good for her. But yeah, just wanted to kind of put those two things out and get your thoughts on the Cabrillo thing, because I guess my one of my friend's grandfather had a big, I guess his last name was Esposito. He's passed away, but he was a member of getting that college up going. But I'm surprised they never did any housing before this. So it's going to be interesting for all the traffic and stuff. I'm not really a fan of the new housing, unfortunately, but I'd like to keep Santa Cruz as Santa Cruz. But I appreciate it there, Charles. You have a great rest of your show.
Thanks a lot. Take it easy. Okay, we've got, I don't know. I'm going to get back to something that I consider far more important here. I invite listeners to raise whatever questions they want to raise, so Evan is entirely within his rights to talk about a new chief of police in Capitola. But when I'm looking at the possibility of a settlement of a war that's gone on for years and claimed thousands of lives, I don't know, it just seems to me to be bigger somehow, longer, lower, wider. Walter Russell Mead today weighs in on this, and his observations, I think, are tremendously insightful. What a week, he begins. Suspected Russian drones disrupted air traffic across northern Europe, while Moscow pounded Kiev with record-breaking assaults. In the Middle East, both fighting and diplomacy intensified. Through it all, the least conventional and most chaos-loving American president of all time still managed to dominate the world's headlines. The headline here is, Trump flips the global script. Now, of course, I've spent the last few minutes discussing Mr. Trump's proposal, a concrete, detailed 20-point proposal for a settlement to the Gaza war. This is not Kinderspiel. This is something very serious and very real, and hopefully successful. Now, at the same time, as President of the United States, if you're going to do the job right, you've got a lot of plates in the air. And one of the other ones is the situation in Eastern Europe with Ukraine, with Russia, and NATO. Mr. President and the President has not turned his back on this. On Gaza, President Trump pledged to Arab leaders that he wouldn't allow Israel to annex any portion of the West Bank. Now, that is another thing that I had not mentioned hitherto. When asked about that, he was very definite. He said, no, I will not permit any more Israeli annexations in the West Bank. There will be no West Bank annexation. Now, this is something the Israelis have always wanted to do. After all, this is Judea and Samaria, the ancient heartland of the Jewish people. But under the partition that they agreed to back in 1948, these areas were not part of Israel. And the Israelis understand that and are willing to live with it. Again, the idea that they are willing to live with things that they're uncomfortable with. Well, on the other side, you have Hamas. If they're uncomfortable with something, their response is that they want to kill it. There is a difference. Mr. Trump opened a new chapter in difficult conversations over the end of the war and prepared the way for a major peace initiative. If he accomplishes this and he doesn't get a Nobel Peace Prize, we will know exactly who those people are. On Ukraine, President Trump sent a stream of signals about a toughening anti-Russia stance that encouraged Ukrainians and challenged Europe by demanding the Europeans dial up sanctions against Russia, signaling potential willingness to send Ukraine powerful American weapon systems like the Tomahawk missile, while removing any limits on how deep into Russia Kiev could attack. Mr. Trump has rhetorically at least seized the high ground on the Ukrainian conflict. He has pivoted his administration away from its earlier efforts to cajole Vladimir Putin into a compromised peace. Underline that. It is difficult today to even imagine that, 8-9 months ago, Mr. Trump was making gratuitous statements scolding Ukraine for having launched a war against a larger and more powerful neighbor. Hey, how smart is it to attack a country that's many times larger than yours? I remember when those statements were made and thinking, Mr. Trump has to understand that this is foolishness. Why would he say it? I mean, he made himself look foolish, like he was accepting nutty narratives. He was attempting this to cajole, there's the word, Putin by playing his propaganda records. We've got Phil on the line, and his calls are always interesting. Let's find out how he's doing. Hey, Phil, what you up to?
Hi, I'm at the gym, so we should not get cut out this time.
Okay.
I promised I would always notify you where I'm calling from. So,
well, that's good, because that last time when you cut out for a while, you had us all wondering what the hell.
Yes, that's why I said that. Let's go back to the original topic that you spent the first 40 minutes on. Imagine, okay, you're the president of the United States, and 20 people are kidnapped by terrorists, and they take them somewhere else, another country, and they say, tell you what, you release, 1,700 murderers from your prisons, and we'll release all these hostages. Is that a deal that you would take?
I'd have to look. I can't answer the question, because there's so many other things that would come into focus. The point you're making is a very good one, an obvious one. The Israelis have made deals of this sort time after time. They've actually done this in the past. One time, as I recall, they traded a number of people for one single guy, just one. And, of course, unfortunately, this encourages the taking of hostages, because if you're willing to make deals like that, people will figure, oh, well, this is a good way to coerce the Israelis and get all our people back. But the Israeli governments over years have determined, and evidently the Israeli people back them up on this, because otherwise they'd vote them out, that getting their people back is so imperative and so important to them that they are willing to accept these lopsided deals. If an American leader undertook such a thing, we saw what happened when President Reagan, for example, traded not prisoners but weapons for hostages being held by Iran. He was almost impeached for that. So it's a different imperative. It really is.
Yes, and I suppose if, I was the father or the brother or the husband of one of those hostages, I would be very biased in favor of what Mr. Trump is proposing. But I'm just thinking about the consequences of letting all these violent people run loose to get back. We don't even know if it's 20. Some of them could not even be alive. We're not sure that it's 20. And I understand what you're saying, that even one person means a lot to have them released.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But it is a lopsided deal.
Oh, sure it is. But again, this is something that Israel has done again and again and again. I guess they figure, look, Hamas has X number of thousand terrorists. If they get 1,800 more, it's only a marginal difference in the amount of effectiveness they have. But the rest of this plan, it's not just a release of these terrorists to go back to the tunnels and start fighting. That's not what's in this plan here. What's in this plan is, yes, they would be released, but they and the rest of Hamas must lay down their arms and either, if they want to remain in Gaza, they have to be non-combatants, or they have free passage out to wherever they want to go.
And how do we go about enforcing that?
Oh boy,
who
you like to ask tough questions, don't you? Well, the
It
president,
is a tough question.
the president's plan, short term, calls for this. What's the title of it? Gaza Administrative. Where in the hell is that wording? Board of Peace. A board of peace. I would like to get board of peace, but the president foresees this, and obviously he's put himself forward as the person who would be chairing it. I still don't think that's really very practical. I mean, he's got more things to do than micromanage the Gaza Strip. But
Well, you mentioned Tony Blair before.
yeah,
And
there's a lot of he's been
Yeah.
prominently mentioned as a person who now he does have the time.
Yeah, he has the time. I just don't know who enforces this stuff. You know, if there are riots, if there is any violence, whose police force is going to come in to bring order to the chaos?
Well, from what I've seen here, there is also buy-in from other Arab states, i.e. Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and Qatar. Egyptians could easily be brought in. They're right there on the spot. And they're obviously, as Muslims, they'd be, what should I say, more congenial to the inhabitants there. So now this is one of the things
If
that
they're willing to do it. Yeah, if they're actually willing to do that, and they have the resources to do it, I guess it's worth a try.
Well, this whole thing, I get those words, worth a try. There are some things that aren't. There are some things you look at them and you say, this isn't even worth bothering with. This
Right.
time, I believe your phrase, "this is worth a try," is very applicable. This plan actually has enough detail in it, enough balance in it, enough buy-in that it's not only worth a try, but I think it actually has at least reasonable odds of succeeding. Is it a lead pipe cinch? Don't make me laugh.
No,
But it actually is, in terms of its what it's calling for and the mechanisms, it's realistic and practical and does have a chance. And in your own words, it's worth a try.
all right.
What do you think?
I don't know. I mean, I haven't read a lot of the details of this proposal, so I'm going largely on what you discussed in the last hour.
Well, go to, let me see. If you go to Real Clear Politics today, your best investment is to buy a copy of the Wall Street Journal. There's a couple of really good pieces. But there's a discussion here. Trump's Gaza plan is significant, but faces obstacles. Well, that's what we've been talking about here. It is significant.
Mhm.
It is significant. It does face obstacles. When I look at the various points of it, an absolute release of the hostages, that's something that we've all been calling for and that Israel's been calling for some time. But that accompanied by disarmament of Hamas and an end to their role in Gaza politics, that seems like a lot to get, and I'd like to have that.
Yeah, me too. Well,
My God,
I will.
we did it again. It's 10 o'clock. Okay, my fault. I didn't watch the clock as carefully as I should have. Yeah. Oh, we shot over.
So we've preempted the local news, which we heard anyway. 'Cause it's the
Actually,
same.
actually, we didn't preempt it because it preempts us. At the top of the hour, there's a computer that automatically engages the news report, and
It didn't, because according to my railroad-approved Seiko watch, it's 1 minute past the hour.
it is. Yes.
Yes, so it didn't preempt.
Oh yeah, it did. I mean, you and I are still talking,
Oh.
but we're not on
Oh,
the air.
we're just talking.
Yeah,
we're
we're
not on
just
the air.
we
Okay.
we can use all the
Okay.
foul language we want. No one will know the difference.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't realize we're not on the air.
No,
Okay.
no, we got we got unilaterally cut off 2 minutes ago.
Oh, that's all right. I've been cut off before.
There you go. Well, listen, thank you for the call. Great insights, and you have a great day. Say hi to Roz for me.
I sure will. Okay. Talk to you later.
Adios.
Bye-bye.
Okay, let's see here. 1. Oh, excellent. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Shoot. Oh my goodness. Doo-doo-doo-doo. Mm-hmm. 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 Welcome back. Hour number 2 begins. It's 10:06 at Santa Cruz Voice. I'm Charles Freedman. Reach me at 831-265-5050. Well, once again, thanks to Phil for his call, and he was so engrossing, and we got so interested in each other that, by golly, I lost track of the time, and 10 o'clock came and went, and of course the automated system seizes control at 10 o'clock sharp, so you lost about, I guess it was maybe another half a minute or so before Phil and I realized what time it was, but you know, you got the benefit of most of what he had to say, and he's essentially he's concerned. He's looking at the costs of the proposal that Mr. Trump has made. He says, hey, this isn't free. Israel's giving up a lot that is quite valuable. But I think his own particular phrase says it. It's worth a try. So I was reflecting here on how Mr. Trump, and I opened today's broadcast by saying, dare we start calling Donald Trump a statesman? Certainly nobody would ever afford that accolade to anyone like, Joe Biden, for example. But there have been those presidents whose accomplishments in international affairs have been so notable that they become regarded as statesmen. Richard Nixon was notably not all that successful in domestic politics, but when I attended UCSC a few years later, and this was a university where he was hated, loathed, and reviled, a bunch of left-wingers, but they all were admiring. In the courses I took on international relations, who were they talking about? Nixon and Kissinger. And the realignments they had made and the way they'd reshaped events, etc., these were statesmen. Barack Obama certainly was no statesman whatsoever. Anybody who would conclude that nonsense accord with Iran, which finally wound up 10 years later in armed action, well, somebody has to clean up the mess of people who attempt to be statesmen but don't quite have the knack for it. So now Walter Russell Mead is looking at the way Trump is flipping the script on both Iran, or rather Hamas, and Russia. The proposal made to Hamas, the total realignment of Mr. Trump's Ukraine policy. Now, both of these moves were typical Donald Trump. They seized the spotlight, keeping him at the center. They changed the narrative, reframing discussions over both Gaza and Ukraine. They emphasized Mr. Trump's commanding stature by contrasting the effect of his words with the sputtering of other heads of state. And they didn't commit him to anything unpleasant or cost him anything serious. That's the key. That's another key. He was asked by a reporter, should NATO nations shoot down Russian airplanes that encroach on NATO airspace? Yes, they should. Does he have to do anything? No. He sent a message. On this plan that he set forward for Gaza. He's made a heroic effort to end a bloody conflict. Now, if this doesn't pan out, it might be Israel's fault. It would almost certainly be Hamas's fault. But no one's going to blame him. No one. He demonstrated power and flexibility by combining deep support for Israel with demands that Prime Minister Netanyahu abandon any plans to annex Palestinian territory, and that he call the Qatari Prime Minister to apologize for violating Qatar's sovereignty by bombing Hamas officials there. He also presented the latest version of his peace plan after stunning victories against Iran and its proxies Israel is the strongest power in the Middle East. Mr. Trump is the only voice that Israel takes seriously. And why shouldn't he be? Everybody else hates, loathes, and despises Israel, so why pay attention to people who hate, loathe, and despise you? You wouldn't do that, would you? The president's assertion that his peace plan will resolve thousands of years of conflict may prove optimistic, but there's no denying he's made more progress than any other head of state in working out a solution to the Gaza war. By embracing Israel while listening to Arab leaders, Mr. Trump has given diplomacy a much-needed boost. Gulf Arabs want stability and economic development. Israelis want peace. See, the things that Trump offers to somebody like Putin, stability, economic development, Putin says, no, I don't want that. I want to occupy territory. I want to build an empire. Middle Eastern Arabs aren't thinking that way. They're thinking, no, we have our lands. We want to live there. We want to live better there. So when Mr. Trump comes in and says, hey, economic development, hey, a rising standard of living, they're happy to listen to him. This is what they want. Think normal human beings. Mr. Trump is doing his best to provide a framework within which Arabs and Israelis alike can progress. Mr. Trump's flip on Ukraine and Russia illustrates his Houdini-like ability to escape predicaments that would entrap conventional politicians. At one level, Team Trump's Russia policy of reaching out to Putin has failed as decisively as Barack Obama's reset button or Joe Biden's efforts to park Russia. In a rare acknowledgement of error, Mr. Trump told French President Macron that the relationship he thought he had with Mr. Putin didn't mean anything. As the Kremlin responded to Washington's conciliatory efforts with scarcely concealed contempt, Mr. Trump needed a new approach. What he's done is flip the script by pivoting to the Ukrainians. But as Europeans like Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk soon noticed, Mr. Trump's new approach puts the ball in Europe's court. If European support fails to meet Trump's high demands, like slapping massive tariffs on China and India to penalize their purchases of Russian oil and gas, the American president will be able to put the blame on weak Europeans and to wash his hands and walk away. None of this costs President Trump anything. Neither in Gaza nor in Europe is President Trump sending troops or spending money, nor has he tied his hands. Both in the Middle East and Europe, the American president can take whatever action he wants. These diplomatic moves over both Gaza and Ukraine were, like so much of what this president does, both unconventional and dazzling. If diplomacy were ballet, Mr. Trump would be a Nijinsky. But not even the greatest dancers can repeal the law of gravity. The president's ability to exploit the advantages of America's hegemonic role in European and Middle East politics is unrivaled. But the final impact of his approach on the eroding foundations of American power remains to be seen. His ambition to rank as a great statesman has become clearer in his second term. He is focused more intensely on foreign affairs than many expected, and he's having a greater effect on the world than more conventional political figures would. To achieve his ambitions, however, Mr. Trump will have to do more than headlines. He'll have to make progress on the great challenges America faces in a changing world. Well, given what I've seen so far, let's just put it this way. I would hesitate to bet against him. The time is 10:15. Telephone number 831-265-5050, 831-265-5050. Big stuff to talk about today. The story that, we've got a note from Carl. At 10 o'clock, the automated system did not switch to the news. Instead, an earlier segment of your own show was broadcast. I know you have no control over that, but I felt you should know. Well, thank you, Carl. Always nice to know what's going on back at the ranch. So it replaced me with me. One of these days I'll figure it out, or maybe I won't. But anyway, it's always helpful when people give me send me an email and tell me what's happening. Incidentally, if you would ever like to email me, I'd love to hear from you. The email address is charles78rpm@yahoo.com. Once again, email me if you wish at charles78rpm@yahoo.com. That's right. Okay. Should we move forward to at this point? Well, I have spent some time today throwing orchids at Mr. Trump. Well, from time to time I throw brickbats, from time to time I throw orchids. I do what I feel is justified by the actions taken at the time. When President Trump manages what I would call a real tour de force, like this Gaza peace plan, it's not only the fact that the plan is balanced enough to be credible, he has worked to establish a framework for it to succeed, including not just Israel, but also the various other frontline Arab states there. It's a masterful job. And whether it succeeds or fails, he does get some credit for it. It's just like I credit Mr. Clinton for attempting to bring about a two-state solution back in 2000. Mr. Clinton's problem was he did not understand the obduracy of Yasser Arafat and the PLO, how they would not sign a settlement because they would rather have the grievance. At this time, Hamas is in a situation. Oh, Carl's on the line. Well, let's grab that call and find out what he has to say, because I, for one, am interested. Good morning, sir. Thanks for the note.
Morning, Charles. You're more than welcome. I wanted to talk about this impending peace proposal in Gaza. My opinion is that it's full of snakes.
Really? Tell me where they are.
Yes. Well, Hamas is not going to go away. They're going to appear to go away, but they're not going to go away. Neither is the desire for Israel to go into the sea, be pushed into the sea. I don't think that's going away either. But I think it may be a clever deception.
By whom?
What do you think?
Well, I tend to agree with you when you say, look, Hamas, they are who they are. They're not going to all of a sudden reform and become liberals. The object of the game here, if you will, Hamas is not going to be won over. The object is to isolate them. And this is why I'm so impressed with the fact that President Trump has worked to improve his relationship with other Mideast rulers. The one fly in the ointment, I can understand why Israel decided to launch an attack against Hamas personnel in Qatar, but that was, I believe, a mistake on the part of Benjamin Netanyahu, because it worked to undermine that solidarity among these other Arab leaders, which could very much benefit Israel in terms of isolation of its most obdurate opponents. I don't think it was any accident that President Trump prevailed upon Prime Minister Netanyahu to actually make a personal phone call and offer an apology. Netanyahu did that. In order to do that, he had to lose some face. That was a serious concession for him to make. But he had the good sense to make it because he realized that it had value. Mr. Netanyahu also is definitely a statesman. He plays three-dimensional chess. Now, if this, for the most immediate thing to do, get the hostages back. Other than that, And after that, the question of what to do with Hamas, well, this proposal gives amnesty and calls for disarmament. If that's followed up, well, at that point you get a reset. Hamas fighters, if they choose to rearm and once again go into terrorist mode, once again make targets of themselves and things.
No, they'll reconstruct as Bola Bola. Now you're fighting Bola Bola.
As well as they can. But again, to the extent that they can be isolated, their capability to do that will be reduced.
They're not going to be isolated. They blend in. They dissolve and reappear as something else. But the idea is the same, and they're still garnering support from the rest of the Muslim, Islamic people that want Israel gone. But for a while they'll be more clever about it. It won't be so visible. Everything will seem to be, on the up and up, but underneath, it's still going to be rotten. That's what I'm afraid of.
Okay. You mentioned that other local Muslims support them. Well, there's been the Abraham Accords, which have normalized relations between Israel and a number of Muslim nations. I look for those. You see, this Hamas end of this war doesn't take place in a vacuum. The ongoing effort to isolate Hamas. I mean, the Abraham Accords is right at the forefront of this. If you bring Saudi Arabia, for example, into that, you make a tremendous difference. And even more important, there are now Palestinians in Gaza who are fighting against Hamas because they're sick to death of the hell and agony that Hamas brings to them and their lives. So
yes, they throw spit wads at them. Maybe publicly.
I think that's kind of an understatement. I believe that Palestinians in Gaza have a real reason to be ticked at Hamas if they think clearly, and
but who would we be more afraid of, the Israelis or the Hamas?
At present, they're more afraid. At present, they're more afraid of Hamas. But if Hamas is disarmed and taken out of the political process, they will be less afraid of them.
Yeah, but that's hard to do. If they did suddenly give us back give Israel back the hostages, that would give them time to reorganize.
3 days, I guess, 72 hours.
Still wage war.
72 hours to turn in the hostages. Well, you've been throwing up some objections, which are obviously well thought out. But the bottom line is, when I was talking with Phil, he also had some reservations. But the phrase he used at the end that we agreed was practical. It's worth trying. Now, I'm going to ask you the same question, Carl, as you look at this proposal. And obviously, if the proposal doesn't go forward, then it's simply more of what we had. Is the proposal worth trying?
Well, it's better than what we have now, isn't it?
Okay, so that's a yes, because that's how it has to be judged. It can't be judged against some utopian, irrationality. It has to be judged against the real alternative.
I think in order for this thing to work, there has to be some real means of verification.
Oh my goodness! President Reagan, thank you. Trust but verify. I agree completely.
Exactly, yes. And how is the world going to go about doing that? Because you don't know who to trust. You got people from Lebanon, the Hezbollah group, and Afghanistan, Iraq, Iran, and Qatar, and Yemen, those people are all interested in, furthering the Israeli push into the sea. And even though representatives from those nations will appear to be on board, behind the scenes, they would be tending to work the other way and undermining things quietly.
Some yes,
And
some yes, some no.
By the time we figure it out, by the time it's exposed, I'm somewhat fearful that they will have reestablished control in Gaza again and be able to continue to assault Israel.
Israel is not going to permit that. They've fought too long and too hard and paid too high a price. The idea that things are going to...
So they're going to have an occupying force, is that what you're saying?
But it's not going to be the IDF. Mr. Trump has... the Board of Peace. Now, who in the hell is the Board of Peace going to be? Well, you asked, is the world going to do this? No, the world isn't, obviously. This is going to be local yokels. The Egyptians will definitely have a role in it. Qatar, I see them as they've been facilitators right along. They've essentially fulfilled a role of providing a communications channel, but I don't see Qatar as a country that wants to see Israel destroyed. Now, obviously, the current Iranian leadership wants nothing more. I agree with you there. But you look, for example, a year or so ago, Syria was headed by the Assad regime, which was bent on being a conduit for arms and assets for Hezbollah and helping promote the destruction of Israel. That regime is gone now. So again, there have been
they got their pee-pees whacked.
There have been substantive changes in the reality on the ground. Hezbollah, for example, has been neutered by the Israelis. I mean, they're now
for the time being.
They're now actually coming. Well, their former source of supply. I mean, they're aider and abetter of Syria. Syria's gone now. The Houthis are in a world of excrement. They really are. Of all these groups, they're the ones who should be spending the most time in the bathroom. Now, Hamas is going to, you say, well, they'll continue to try to get back into a position where they can conduct acts of terror. Obviously, you're correct. No sane person could possibly argue with that. What I'm saying is that their ability to do that is going to be seriously impacted by what has happened since October 7th, 2023.
I really hope you're right.
Well, it's like the Iranian government still wants an atomic weapon, but as of a few weeks ago, they were rather seriously set back in their efforts. Now, the Ayatollah hasn't changed his mind. Just recently, I read that the United Nations had actually, amazingly enough, instituted snapback sanctions against Iran, because they simply are absolutely obdurate. We don't care what you say. We won't allow your inspectors in. We want to go. We want to excavate under Fordow and get our enriched uranium back. And you're saying, in a pig's eye, you will. And so, once major changes are made, they actually impact future developments. Since the 12-day war, Iran is no longer capable of what it was capable of before. Since being reduced, as it has been, Hamas is degraded. Does that mean they stop attempting to be bad actors? Of course not. I agree with everything you've said so far as that's concerned. But their capabilities have been tremendously reduced.
I'll agree with that. Now, when you were talking about Iran, I still am at a loss to understand why, if the Ayatollah wants a bomb so bad, why didn't you just buy one? And China is willing, we've seen them, they're willing to provide the means of delivery.
That's a hell of a question. Maybe it's a question, I don't know. Maybe it's a question of transport. How the hell, if Iran buys an atomic weapon in China or North Korea, how do they get the damn thing to Iran?
Well, they're not very big.
So you're suggesting they could just load it onto a DC-3 and fly it?
They could. Is anybody interfering with flights from, say, Russia to Iran?
Yeah, Russia has the biggest supply of thermonuclear weapons, and they need
And
money.
they need money right now.
Yep. Golly, Carl, now this is something I hadn't even thought about, and it seems at this point I'm smacking my forehead with my palm and saying, "You fool." But there must be reasons, because obviously, if the Ayatollah is so desperate for a weapon, and he's, we have to build this facility and have these centrifuges and this and that and the other thing, and you're saying, hey, eliminate the middleman, offer the Russians a bunch of dough, and get a nuke.
More than one.
I don't have an intelligent answer for that. It seems to be it's so obvious. I agree with you. It's the obvious answer to the question.
Maybe the Ayatollah feels that it has to be manufactured in Iran.
Perhaps this is what Allah has told him.
Yes. Well, let's hope Allah doesn't tell him anything else.
Oh, hey, Allah talks to that guy every day, and he hears every word. This is why I was so freaked out. This is why I voted for President Trump, because he promised me that the Ayatollah wouldn't have a weapon, an atomic bomb. Can you imagine some whack-brained religious fanatic with an atomic bomb? Good God, what could go wrong?
Well, it's within his reach without having to build it.
Yeah, cash and carry.
Another actor we haven't heard from is Pakistan.
Well, they have a bomb.
They do, and they're not real happy with us, especially since we went in there and took Osama out of their little enclave there that they knew about.
Right. Yeah, they definitely got egg on their face with that one. And the thing is, with there's the conflict between India and Pakistan. Which of these two countries do you want to make an alliance with, to work with? Like I was saying earlier, who do you want to work with, Israel or Hamas? Hamas offers nothing. Who do you want to work with, India or Pakistan? Pakistan offers nothing. India is a rising economy and a potential economic powerhouse. Of course you want to work with India. Pakistan is, basically a wasteland.
Oh, I think they produce pistachios.
So do we here in California. Probably ours are better.
Yeah.
But that's an important. I'm just thunderstruck by your idea. Why doesn't Iran simply buy an atomic bomb from the Russians or the Chinese
or two?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Well, the Chinese is already delivering rockets to them.
Right, and
you know that.
Yeah, and so far as
hypersonic rockets, right? One of them got through and landed at the airport at Tel Aviv.
There are, of course, international prohibitions against this type of activity, but then, of course, you're going to say, well, look, these are criminal, outlaw, rogue states. That's like telling a criminal, oh, hey, you've got a gun. That's illegal. Police, Mr. Hemingway.
And on top of that, the serial number's been filed off.
Oh, golly, I guess I'll have to throw this away. Right.
Yeah. Signature bond, you'll be out in a couple hours, and then you can go find another one.
Not even that. I mean, just, you don't like my gun? Here. See, it works real good. Take that body away and throw it in the river.
Well, the trouble is they arrest these people and then they turn them loose again.
Well, that's certainly true. And then they commit the most atrocious crimes. That's another issue entirely. But I can't help but wonder if the left and the Democratic Party really feel that allying themselves with street crime and lawlessness is a winning political strategy. You got to wonder about that.
Yeah, but they don't advertise it like that. They advertise it as protecting your freedom, protecting your Fifth Amendment rights, your not the Second Amendment, but protecting your rights,
Your right to be
they package it differently.
Your right to knock somebody on the head, your right to storm into a store and simply help yourself.
Your right to not be bothered by law enforcement unless they have a real good reason. Look, just for an example, and you know what I'm talking about, but as an example, look at how they've packaged this Prop 50 in California.
Oh, I've seen some of the TV ads, and
they vote yes on it because
I issued the warning yesterday. If you don't want to see this pass, you better open your wallet and make a contribution, because the other side has 3 times the monetary resources we do, and that's not a good ratio. I'll say it again. Go to No on 50, and I urge the donation. A case of beer, $20. If everybody does that, they'll have plenty of dough.
Well, what do you think? Do you think common sense is going to prevail over this one, or you think it's going to pass?
Flip a coin. I really don't know. There are powerful forces at work on both sides. I have seen outrageous ballot initiatives fall by the wayside in California, even though the left supported them. Sometimes it wasn't even close. And so it's altogether possible that this too will fall to the ground. I am hoping and praying that it does. Right now, if you ask me which way I would bet, I'm not betting.
There's nothing stopping them from putting it on the ballot again.
Generally speaking, once the voters have spoken, if you go to the well again, what happens is you lose by a larger margin. I remember I learned that lesson years ago when I was over in Santa Cruz, and there were a number of campaigns to impose rent control in Santa Cruz. And the first time it was put on the ballot, it was like 49.5% to 50.5%. So it lost by just this microscopic margin. So they tried again. And the second time it lost by, I guess, 2% or something like that. So they tried again. And on the third time it lost by like 8 or 10 points. So
I believe it's going to be proposed again.
Well, I believe that if it's defeated once, it will be defeated again. I've seen that happen in the past, not just with rent control, but other things as well. Generally, once the voters speak, they reaffirm.
I may be wrong, but the gay marriage thing didn't go that way. They kept hammering at it until it finally passed.
It never passed at the polls. What happened was that the Supreme Court made a ruling that
right.
essentially took the issue away. And since that time, there has been a tremendous amount of acceptance on the part of the general public. I would say that is now settled law and not a matter of political contention.
Yeah, I have no problem with that.
See? And I was one of the people who voted against it.
They wanted to claim.
I was one of the people who voted against it because you know me. Words mean things, And I had no problem with civil unions that had all of the force and benefits of marriage. Just, the problem with me was the word marriage being applied to a same-sex union. I lost that argument.
That was my objection as well.
See,
It's funny how
I lost that argument.
That community, they want things for themselves, separate bathrooms, separate this, separate rules for them. But when it comes to institutions like marriage, they want to claim that for them as well, and it isn't biblically a marriage. It isn't, according to the Bible, a marriage.
Well, bear in mind this is not a theocracy. This is this is a secular government. Church and state are separated, and under the Equal Protection Clause, the Supreme Court of the United States found that people who wanted to get married ought to be able to get married. Again, this is
that's why I used to write. I
I
used to write in the comments in the Sentinel.
Yeah.
When am I going to be allowed to marry my cat?
Well, now that's silly. That's silly because what we're talking.
Well, what do you mean it's silly? It's eventually it'll get there the way things are going.
We're talking about.
Guy's got a donkey he really likes.
That's again that's.
Why?
No, that's Carl. That you're embarrassing yourself. That's silly. We're talking about consenting adults, and by that I mean consenting adult human beings. So we're not only excluding animals, we're also excluding minors. So these are important distinctions.
Are we then excluding bugs too?
Do you mean insects? Yes, I believe so.
Yes, it's.
So
okay.
if you're home, if you suddenly find yourself confronted by the alien, you don't have to worry about it wanting to elope with you.
Well, the Supreme Court will have to decide on that when it comes, huh?
No, it won't. Now, again, these arguments are specious, and we can have fun, laughing at them, but they're not to be taken seriously. No unions between human beings and animals. We're talking about consenting adult humans.
In 1950, that would be almost as bizarre as the animal thing.
A lot has changed since 1950. Some for the worse, some for the better. In 1950, my wife and I could not be married.
Even out west.
There were miscegenation laws in many states. I don't know if they applied here, but I think they were only repealed later after that. But again, even lacking that, there were plenty of places where my wife couldn't have gone or where I couldn't have accompanied her. And that is a change that we underwent since then, both in terms of law and in terms of culture, which has been inestimably for the better in the country.
Yeah, I remember I was in Alabama in flight school in 1969.
Uh-huh.
There were still separate bathrooms and drinking fountains. I was shocked.
Mm-hmm.
In 1969.
Yeah, I believe it.
I was really shocked, having grown up here.
Hey, well, my mother told me a story one time. She grew up during the big band era and loved to dance. She grew up in Eureka, and they'd have dances there. And there was, I believe, one black family in town, and of course their kids went to the schools with everybody else, and big deal. Nobody gave a damn. It was just hey, those are our friends. Those are our neighbors. During the war, I guess in 1943 or so, she went to a dance in Stockton. Cab Calloway and his orchestra were playing. Oh, man, would I have loved to have heard them at that time. Anyway, there was a big rope down the middle of the dance floor. White dancers on one side, black dancers on the other side. My mom is up on the balcony. She turns to somebody and said, what's this rope nonsense about? Where does that come from? Looked at her like she was from another planet, but she'd never seen anything like that before. And she said, told me the story, sooner or later, somebody, she doesn't remember, which side it came from, but there was a knifing across the rope, and trouble broke out, and immediately Cab and the boys swung into Trilon swing at fantastic volume and tempo. Those guys were pros. They knew what to do when there was trouble.
Stop fighting and start dancing.
Yeah, let's have some really burning music. You pay attention to what's going on here. I got this. But again, there's a case where, the segregation, the way my mom said it, said if they hadn't had the rope there, they probably wouldn't have the knifing.
Now today, that wouldn't be true, would it?
Don't know. Obviously, things change, but again, there are a lot of ways in which I wouldn't trade, this for that. People have become more open-minded to other people's foibles. One of the primary mottos of America, I think, has always been live and let live, but often we haven't. We've said, oh, well, that person's the wrong race, or, oh, that person, they like the wrong gender or whatever. The answer to that is, well, it's none of your damn business. As long as the
it's a form of snobbishness.
Yeah, as long as the person isn't inflicting their carnal desires on you, then your job is to mind your own business.
I have this impression that it usually rolls on down from the hoity-toity society.
Yeah.
The hoity-toity element in the society.
Today,
they love to turn their noses up at people that are different or less fortunate.
And today, some of the most aristocratic, upper-class twits that you'll find in the country are in the faculty lounges of the Harvards and Yales. And who are they looking down their noses at? People like you and me.
Yeah. Anyway, I've got to let you go. I've got things to do. But
okay,
I sure enjoyed.
I'll leave you with this.
Chat.
If you ever want to pick up an artifact, back in 1776, 1777, when the Declaration of Independence was signed, the very first coins ever issued by the brand new United States of America bore a motto. It wasn't "In God We Trust," and it wasn't "E Pluribus Unum." You know what motto was on those coins? Mind your business. And I believe that those coins should be today. That's a motto that every American needs to surround.
Wow. Yeah.
I found out about that. I got a book
Well, that was, of course,
on antique coins.
that was, of course,
Go ahead.
I think that might have been a an aspersion on England for wanting to get in here and tell the United States what to do.
I don't know, whatever. But just when I looked at this, I'm looking at a book on coins, coin collecting and like that. It has illustrations of all these, and I'm looking at this ancient penny, and clear as day it says on it, "Mind your business," and I was absolutely charmed.
Love to have one of those.
Yeah, they're real collector's items now, but I've never actually seen one. But you can get picked online. Have some fun.
I will do that.
Thank you for the call, Carl. Appreciate
You're very welcome. Thank you for the chat.
Appreciate your spending time with us today. Okay, it is, speaking of time, it is now, getting on towards 11. Well, we better run our ads for this hour because we haven't done that yet.
Cannabis is one of nature's most beneficial plants, and at Treehouse Dispensary, we use it to build community. In addition to dispensing cannabis and education, Treehouse hosts First Friday events that feature our community's local artists, makers, and activists. If you're 21 plus, join us at 3651 Soquel Drive every First Friday from 5 to 8 p.m. to enjoy the work of local artists and musicians, find one-of-a-kind gifts, and learn more about the top cannabis products in California. See you soon.
The weather will change. Knox Roofing here. We all remember the story of the three little pigs. We all know the third pig hired Knox Roofing to do his roof. Every day he crawls into his home knowing no wind, no earthquake, fire, or even wolf can hurt his house. The weather will change for the good and sometimes not so good. Have a Knox roof installed on your home, and one thing you can be certain of, good security. I promise you that. The number to call is 461-0634. Thanks, folks.
Satisfy your hunger with a fresh, prepared, twice-daily grab-and-go sushi you'll find waiting for you at Sushi Market Sprouts, 2 blocks from the beach at 300 7th Avenue in Santa Cruz. Fresh, delicious, and oh so good.
Hello, I'm Junko, and I look forward to serving you at the Sushi Market Sprouts.
Satisfy your hunger right now with the delicious ramen and sushi you'll find waiting for you at Kaito, easy in and out location in the Capitola Mall food court. Special orders welcome. Fresh, delicious, and oh so good.
This is Koji. I'm looking forward to seeing you at my restaurant, Kaito.
You have to move now. No problem. Store your stuff at Anbar Self-Storage and U-Haul. Easy off Highway 1 on Airport Boulevard by the airport. 24/7 security your door at Anbar Self-Storage and U-Haul in Freedom.
You sold your motorcycle to a friend in Fresno and need to deliver it. Well, Anbar Self-Storage and U-Haul in Freedom has motorcycling car trailers ready to go. Easy off Highway 1 on Airport Boulevard by the airport. Anbar Self-Storage and U-Haul in Freedom.
At 10:52, welcome back to the Charles Freedman radio program. Great callers today. Heard from Evan, heard from Phil, heard from Carl, all with interesting points to raise, and I'm just hoping that sometime in the next hour you'll give us a buzz and the benefit of your viewpoints and observations. 831-265-5050 is the telephone number to reach the program. Between now and the top of the hour, I'm thinking that we've spent most of our first 2 hours talking about President Trump and his statesmanship, and in some cases, I mean, it reminds me of Tim Howes at a pool table. Now, what's that all about? When I was in high school, Tim Howes was a fellow student at Watsonville High, and he used to invite occasionally me and about 4 or 5 other guys over to his house. They had their garage set up as a kind of a place where guys could hang. There was a table where we could play cards, and there was a refrigerator stocked with soft drinks, and there was a pool table. And Tim would occasionally, making a shot, and a bunch of high school kids. So he'd make this shot, and it would just be incredible. And, he'd sink 2 balls at once or something like that, and he'd throw his arms in the air and say, "My plan! My plan!" And it was, we'd all laugh because it was obvious that he'd had no plan at all, that this was simply a fortuitous outcome of a shot that really, was amateurish, not all that well thought out, but for some reason it really went well. When I look at Mr. Trump's navigation of these situations, somehow it almost seems like, he should be throwing his arms up in the air and yelling, "My plan, my plan." Because I can't help but wonder, did he have all of this, planned out from the beginning? Was this a carefully conceived strategy a la Nixon and Kissinger? Or is it good fortune and good instincts, but basically flying by the seat of the pants? As I look particularly at his efforts to navigate the crisis between Russia and Ukraine, when he returned to office, he did so with a false idea, which, as I mentioned earlier today, he has confessed publicly to Mr. Macron. Yeah, by golly, I got that wrong. He honestly figured that the relationship he had with Vladimir Putin during the first 4 years, his first presidential administration, that he'd be able to simply get together with old Vlad and say, "Okay, it's time to knock all this off now. Let's all, calm down, and I'll, make some accommodating noises. And essentially, you don't like Zelensky. Well, I'll make like I don't like him either, and we'll get this settled." It didn't work. It didn't work. And it strikes me that in that instance, that was a misjudgment by Mr. Trump. And I've just explained, why it happened. So, we talk about this on the program all the time. There's a reason for everything. Not always an excuse, but there's certainly a reason. And that was the reason. It's understandable, makes sense. So the question is, how long does Mr. Trump cling to this wishful thinking, this false image of who Putin is? How long does he cling to that and reject the idea of dealing with Vladimir Putin 2025? Well, he's obviously finally reached that point. And again, I call attention to Donald Trump's tremendous reserve of patience. This man is tremendously reticent. He is willing to wait and wait and wait and wait. And I will admit, sometimes that just drives me buggy. But I've often heard it said, and now we're seeing it demonstrated, precipitate action is not always a good idea. As a matter of fact, often it's an error. The longer you keep your options open, the better you serve yourself. Now, in that sense, Mr. Trump can definitely be said to have method in his policy, because we've seen it again and again. This is not something that he has to consciously will himself to do. This patience was demonstrated in his dealing with the Ayatollah. This patience is now demonstrated in his dealing with Putin and with Hamas. But there does come a point, despite how patient Mr. Trump is willing to be and has been, there does come a point at which it's time to say, well, it's Sydney or the Bush. That time came with Iran a few weeks ago and resulted in the destruction of Iran's nuclear capacity. It is coming now with Hamas as Mr. Trump puts this 20-point program out, and as Carl and Phil have pointed out, hey, this isn't bulletproof. It isn't perfect. But when I put it to Carl, well, do you believe it's worth a try? He says, oh, yeah, definitely. It's certainly better than what's going on now. And in that I wholeheartedly concur. And that, after all, is the question. Carl eagerly acknowledged, no, we're not choosing between this plan and utopia. Ain't no utopia. Ain't no perfection. Doesn't exist, can't be had. So do we go for something that's an improvement over the status quo? The answer, certainly you do. And once again, we're indebted to Phil for those words, it's worth a try. And we're indebted to Carl for reminding us, trust but verify. The time is now almost 11 o'clock. I will be back in 6 minutes with the final hour of today's program, during which time I expect to hear from you. Thank you for listening. This is the Charles Freedman Program. Okay.
Toilet. But many cleaning products have chemicals.
I'm ashamed to admit it, but I'm a freeloader. And in big government America, it's we rich people who freeload the most.
Years ago, I built this beach house. That's younger me there. The house was on the edge of the Atlantic Ocean. A risky place to build, but I built anyway, 'cause a federal program guaranteed my investment.
It can happen to you. Protect your home with flood insurance.
Congress created government flood insurance to help foolish people who don't buy private flood insurance and lose their homes when the water rises.
The flood insurance program provides valuable protection for approximately 5.5 million homeowners.
So taxpayers may help foot the bill if a flood hits movie stars' homes on Malibu Beach, or Derek Jeter's new mansion in Florida, or the Kennedy family compound. Why? We rich people should insure our own homes. Eventually, a storm swept away my first floor, but I didn't lose a penny. Thanks. I never invited you there, but you paid for my new first floor. Then the whole house went. Government flood insurance covered my loss and many others.
We rich people freeload off you taxpayers all the time because the overpromisers in there keep churning out special deals for politically favored groups. And they tend to be rich people because the rich can afford lobbyists.
There are thousands of lobbyists within a few blocks of where I was standing. If you want some advantage, you pay them to persuade Congress to give you a special tax break like the one for electric cars.
It is endless the possibilities that this bill will pursue, encouraging energy-efficient products such as plug-in hybrid cars.
His tax credit led dealers like this one to advertise free cards. Buy one for $6,000, get a $6,000 tax credit. Governor Mike Huckabee got one. His friend got 7. And I got this one. Totally free.
Free for me anyway. You taxpayers paid for it.
Then I put solar panels on the roof of my new home. Why? Because Congress gave me a big tax break.
If you want to, for instance, invest in solar energy in your home, we have tax credits in there.
So many of these programs that are supposed to have a broad benefit end up having a narrow benefit.
To me. To us who are rich enough to put solar panels in the house or buy an electric car or have a beach house on the edge of an ocean.
So it's another situation where the government creates a benefit and the people with more money, with better tax accountants, are better able to take advantage of it.
We cannot turn back. Not with an economy to fix and farms to save.
Farmers get lots of well-intended handouts from government. But who benefits? Mostly rich farmers. And people like Bon Jovi, who owns acres of land in New Jersey but pays only $100 in state property tax. Because he raises honeybees, he qualifies for a honeybee subsidy. Bruce Springsteen owns hundreds of acres of land but pays little tax on it because an organic farmer works his land. His poorer neighbors pay more.
It's unfair that I have to pay for an acre and a half $6,000, and then they're paying for hundreds of acres for $200.
America's single biggest recipient of farm subsidies has been Maurice Wilder. The multimillionaire owns some farmland, but he mostly builds homes and offices. Here's one of his many homes. Gorgeous view, but no crops around here. Others who've collected farm subsidies are basketball star Scottie Pippen, billionaire Ted Turner, even the family of anti-subsidy Congresswoman Michelle Bachmann. None of these people broke any laws. They or their families just own land that qualifies for handouts.
But think about how much money we could save if these guys just didn't pass so many laws that encourage freeloading.
But they do, year after year. They micromanage life with subsidies. And the winners are not so much the needy, but people like Bon Jovi, Ted Turner, Maurice Wilder, and me.
John Stossel, definitely worth watching. Okay. Man, even if that was good, I wouldn't like it. Okay. 11:06, hour number 3 begins. The hour changes, the number remains the same. 831-265-5050. 831-265-5050 to reach the program. Join the erudite and incisive people who have called the program today to offer their views. Okay, during this third hour, with your kind permission, I'm going to look at some other things that have cropped up. Essentially reflections on where we are at the moment. This is a political program. There is a political development. It happened a couple of days ago. It hasn't been mentioned on the program primarily because it really doesn't make that much difference. Eric Adams, the mayor of New York City, running for a second term, who already took himself out of the race for the Democratic nomination for that office and decided he would run as an independent. He's consistently been placing fourth in a field of 4. He finally, Allah be praised, decided to drop out of the New York City mayor's race. BFD. Eric Adams was perfect for New York City. Not as a leader. A less imposing mortal in a city of self-adoring deities could scarcely be found. Still, less as any sort of public official, his record in office for the past 4 years stands as empty and pointless as the hapless New York Mets Citi Field will be now that baseball's postseason is underway. But as a totem of Democratic misrule, he probably can't be bettered, at least not until the next mayor takes office in January. Mr. Adams, who on Sunday bowed to the inevitable and announced his withdrawal from the mayoral race, is a story for our times. A mediocrity propelled not by talent or by vision, but by the exigencies of municipal politics into the big job in America's biggest city. The measure of his political failure is that an incumbent elected 4 years ago, he couldn't muster enough support to even compete in his party's primary. Instead, he tried to run as an independent, despite the advantage of incumbency in a city that gave the name Tammany Hall to our culture. Even though his two principal opponents were a self-declared socialist who wants to globalize the Intifada in the city with the world's largest Jewish population, and a washed-up former governor best known for sending thousands of COVID-infested patients from hospitals to nursing homes. Mr. Adams still managed to trail all of these in his bid for re-election. Poll last week showed him with 8. That is 8% of the vote. Let the number not be 7, nor let it be 9, but yet 8. That gave him the distinction of being even less popular than most of the world leaders who came to New York last week for the annual charade of vacuous virtue signaling known as the United Nations General Assembly. Mr. Adams isn't to blame for all the city's problems. Crime rose sharply, then fell under the tenure of this ex-policeman, though the latest data belie the sense that most Americans still have a pervasive insecurity. He isn't singularly responsible for the sights, sounds, and particularly the smells of urban decay. The familiar aroma that hangs over like a miasma over vast swaths of the city, a rich cocktail of marijuana smoke and human waste. He isn't primarily responsible either for the thriving population of rats, far and away the most procreative and industrious of the city's residents. Many of the humans who can leave have already done so. Rodents are bullish on the place. After his departure, must rank one of those rare cases of the sinking ship deserting the rats. But all this captures a little of what he can be held responsible for. The deteriorating quality of life for most people in this once great city, vagrancy, destitution, crumbling infrastructure and public services, all the while as costs rise inexorably with a diminishing number of residents paying a larger and larger share of the taxes. You know, that always brings to mind that constant cry of the left, why don't the rich pay their fair share of the taxes? We find that in places like New York City and places like California, affluent people pay outsized shares of the tax. In California, what do you have, millions and millions of people who pay the state income tax. Half the revenue is derived from the 1 or 2% of the taxpayers. I guess to those people who are calling for a fair share, the fair share is everything, because nothing less seems to satisfy them. And of course, if you take everything, you get nothing, because people won't work for free. To management of the city must be added the harm Mr. Adams did to its reputation. Last year, he became the first sitting mayor in the city's history to be prosecuted on federal charges, including accused of taking illegal campaign contributions and receiving perks from foreign entities in exchange for official acts, all of which led to his finding a soulmate in President Trump. The Justice Department dropped the charges against Mayor Adams around the same time that the mayor helpfully adopted a supportive stance toward the new administration's immigration policies. In the past few weeks, a coterie of business leaders have been trying to persuade Mr. Trump to give a job to Mayor Adams. Ambassador to Saudi Arabia was considered to get him out of the race. The aim was to consolidate the opposition to Zohran Mamdani, the youthful socialist who won the Democratic primary. Andrew Cuomo, the man whose COVID decisions as mayor likely killed more New Yorkers than 9/11, may now have a sliver of hope. And with Republican Curtis Sliwa still in the race and holding on to about 10% of the vote, it's barely a sliver. New York needs a break from incompetent, expensive, and corrupt Democratic Party rule. Someone who can address the legitimate concerns of citizens who feel increasingly priced out of its economic opportunities while managing to restore the confidence of the capitalists who create the wealth and drive the city's economy. It's happened before. For 2 decades, from 1994 to 2013, the administrations of Rudy Giuliani and Mike Bloomberg led the city from some of its darkest days to some of its best. Mr. Adams' long overdue departure might once have offered hope. Now, looking at the state of the race, it only portends something potentially even worse. Oh, now, Phil's on the line. And this time, he's got a point to make about tax rates. So let's find out what he has to say. Sir, welcome to the program.
And this time I'm home for a change, which is rare.
Oh, good for you.
On a landline phone, on an old-fashioned landline phone. Well, not real old-fashioned. It's not made of Bakelite, but old-fashioned for today.
Well, no wonder you sound so good.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's one of the reasons we keep the landline. The other is redundancy in case cell towers go down. And it costs us to do that. It costs us about $75 a month to keep this landline. So it's not cheap, but it gives me more confidence. Anyway, the reason I called, yes, it's of course logical that if you take everything, you're going to get nothing. But can you explain to me how did things work when, back in the Eisenhower days, very wealthy people were taxed at something like 90%? And what would happen if we went back to that today? I think an Elon Musk could afford to have 90% of his earnings taken, and he probably wouldn't even feel it.
You wouldn't want that. You wouldn't want that. For one thing, if that were the case, Mr. Musk would never have been able to buy... what was the name of it? My Face or whatever it was, and turn it into X and release all of those, emails and delineate how they did that. But getting back to your basic question, in those days of insane tax rates, a couple of things. First of all, virtually nobody paid those tax rates. The people who made the money were tax accountants whose job was to come in and find what you could write off, what you could depreciate, etc., etc., etc. Jack Benny, who was noted as a man who was very tight with a dollar, was constantly making jokes on his program about this, and people laughed at them because they all understood them. They were funny because they dealt with reality. All good humor has to be based on reality. You know that. So what happened? Well, in 1962-63, John F. Kennedy proposed that these rates finally be dropped, and there were people who said, oh, we can't do that, we need the revenue. But Mr. Kennedy said, look, these rates are punitive. If you drop them, people will actually work more and do more, and there'll be a bigger pie. And lo and behold, that turned out to be true, and it laid the foundation for a very prosperous decade through the 1960s. John F. Kennedy was assassinated in 1963, but his tax law, enacted about that time, continued to give benefits through the decade. Now, the next time this same strategy was employed, it was another Irishman, this time Ronald Reagan. And his idea was, let's drop the tax rates as low as we possibly can and eliminate all the loopholes. And this finally reached fruition in the tax reform of 1986, in which the top marginal tax rate actually went down to 28%, which was the lowest it had been since Calvin Coolidge was president. But,
I remember that.
But
yeah.
At the same time, an entire forest of write-offs and special treatments and this and that and the other thing were eliminated. So people making a large income who used to, okay, well, your tax rate is what, 80%. What do you actually pay? Maybe 10, maybe 15, because you're able to write all this off. Buy a bankrupt business, write off the losses, all kinds of stuff. But after the Reagan tax reform, it's, okay, well, you make a lot of money. What's your tax rate? 28%. What do you actually pay? By God, I'm actually paying 28%. And the amount of money the government realized actually rose. It was supposed to be revenue neutral. Scored by the Congressional Budget Office, it said, well, for every dollar of reduction in rate, we give $1 of takebacks in tax expenditures. That's what they call write-offs, tax expenditures. Anyway, in actual practice, this worked so well that it jet-charged the prosperity of the 1980s. I have heard people suggest, let's go back to the Eisenhower years. I would remind you, think about this. Ike was in office right after World War II. In the 1950s, most of the countries that fought the war, Japan, Germany, France, Britain, they were still recovering. And the United States of America was basically the only country in the world that still had its industrial plant completely intact. We were producing everything in those days. There should have been tremendous economic growth and certainly no recessions. During the 1950s, we had 3 recessions in the United States. And that shouldn't have happened. I mean, with the deck that stacked, it should have been just, hey, build it and sell it. But no. And unfortunately, one of Mr. Eisenhower, everybody thinks of him nowadays as some kind of moderate or liberal or something like that. Eisenhower was very conservative to the point that he actually embraced the idea, well, we need to balance the federal budget. Now, that's a good idea. But because we need to balance the federal budget, we can't drop these tax rates, because if we drop these tax rates, we lose this revenue. He was unable to see this idea of dynamic scoring, the idea that by dropping the tax rates, you actually leave that money in the economy where it's going to create more wealth and result in higher receipts to the government. Eisenhower didn't see that. Kennedy and Reagan did.
So he really was short-sighted in that regard.
I wouldn't say short-sighted. I would say blindered by the age he came out of. That budgeting was a zero-sum game. If you reduce tax rates, then whatever revenue that tax was bringing in is lost. Simple arithmetic. But the reality of it is a little bit more complex. After all, Eisenhower never pretended to be an economist. He was a general, and a damn good one.
Yes. Well, you're right. He came out of an era when borrowing money was considered almost sinful. I remember the first car I bought, I paid cash for because my dad brought me up that way. If you can't afford it now, don't buy it. Don't get yourself into that. So That was the World War II generation way of thinking. But you're right, there's a dynamic component to it.
And the idea of going back to that top marginal tax rate of some insane level, the effect on our economy would be disastrous.
Even if we lowered the rate for middle-class people, you're saying don't punish those in the highest brackets.
Well, at that point, what you're doing is once again providing a tremendous subsidy for tax experts and honest and dishonest, illegal money laundering. It would be like prohibition.
Yeah, I get it.
Now, if you expect people to pay taxes, you have there's a good reason to keep them reasonable. Outrageous taxation was what led to the first American Revolution, after all.
Yeah, I still struggle with what is really a fair. What is a fair rate? What is a fair rate for?
Well, the good news
who works at the fast food.
The good news for that is that if you ask 10 different people, you'll probably get 10 different answers, and that's what makes Congress's job so difficult.
That's right. It reminds me, it's a related topic, that when I was in Rutgers University for their urban planning program, I had a zoning law professor. He was renowned nationwide, Norman Williams. He was a great professor, but obviously left-wing, because he taught us that that a developer has the right to a reasonable return on his investment, but not to maximize the return, that he was not entitled to be greedy. And no one in the class, including myself, was sophisticated enough to raise the question, what is a fair return on investment? Who decides how much a developer should make? Who puts the limit on it? It's like Rush Limbaugh's discussion about minimum wage. How much is enough? Is $15 enough? Is $25 enough? Is $100 an hour enough? And whoever decides that is king of the hill.
With the
same idea.
With the developer, you put me in mind of a call we had, I think it was just yesterday, from Evan. He was talking about people getting fair return, and he talked about markup on merchandise, and he mentioned his own mother, who ran a vintage clothing store, and she would occasionally find some item at the Goodwill that was of the proper brand and style and everything. She'd pick it up for $1, and she'd take it to her shop and sell it for $65, $70. He said, "This is, there's something wrong with that." I said, "Are you kidding?" No, she's got her knowledge of that merchandise. That's what enables her to spot something that most people wouldn't understand what they were looking at, but she does. And how many items does she buy that wind up either getting damaged or nobody buys them or whatever? When you have an item that you have a good return on, you need to make the most return on that in order to balance the times when you don't do well. And with the developer, it's the same thing. There's no guarantee that everything they do is going to make profit.
Gosh, I wish you had been. I wish you had been in that class back then. I would have loved to hear Professor Williams' response. But Listen, it's too late now. He's gone.
We have got, all of a sudden, a couple of phone calls have come in, so I am going to say thanks and move on, but always appreciate your calls, Phil. You have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Okay, we have 2 callers here, so I'm going to take them in the order in which they appeared. Zach is first. His issue is taxes. Hello, sir. Good afternoon and welcome.
Hey, thanks for taking my call. Thank you. Good afternoon to you. So yeah, a long time ago on taxes, your caller Phil was just talking about what is a fair rate, and well, I don't know. Not that I think of all the good ideas here, but I a long time ago thought, why don't you just? This is how I just naturally used to think about taxes as a kid, but I found out from my dad that there are these things called tax brackets, which which makes a mess out of everything, in my opinion. So I just thought to myself, well, what would happen if you flat taxed, and you can flat tax income? Maybe I'm against that in the long term, but I'm just saying, let's go ahead and run this number. Flat tax income, you flat tax consumption, what you buy and stuff like that. And then you flat tax basically almost everything aside from maybe like certain like real estate transactions, what do you call it, commissions. You don't flat tax those or anything like that. Anyway, so I ran like a general number, and it was a huge number of revenue. It wasn't quite as much as the government would make on using tax brackets, but the general number that I ran, and I'm no expert, I just have a calculator. I'm just an average guy with a calculator. It was almost as much. And now here's the thing. I didn't take into consideration how much money would be generated because of people being overtaxed. It would be, and I think the number I went with was like, I think I went with 7% flat tax on everything.
Uh-huh.
And it was still almost as much revenue as we get now, which I was impressed by that. I don't know. I not trying to toot my own horn on that, but I was like, hey, maybe I'm onto something here, because you think about 7% on everything and what that would do to incentivize businesses, incentivize everything. I think it would make things boom, really, as if you had a flat tax, is what I'm saying.
You're not the only person who believes that. There's an active movement in favor of flat tax. One of the things that a flat tax would do, it would eliminate people making business decisions based on tax considerations. For example, right now there are people who will buy an electric car because they say, oh, well, if I buy the electric car, I get this tax write-off, that credit, et cetera, et cetera. But they're not, there's also, a downside. Maybe normally they would have bought a gasoline-powered car, but they allow these tax considerations to change their judgment. These are distortions in the marketplace that essentially create false signals as to what people actually want and what people should actually be producing. So to the extent that you distort the economy by offering these subsidies and underwritings and et cetera, you make our economy less efficient. Resources aren't channeled to where they will do the most good.
Right, exactly. And I think that's that's what you call big casino, is when businesses make the decisions to move out of certain areas because they just can't afford the taxation. So it's, you take that away. That's big casino, in my opinion. But I don't know if any government would be willing enough to, try to change things through, the legislative and.
Not these days. Donald Trump, for example, now has his golden share of United States Steel, which he has just used to tell them, look, you can't, you were going to close this one steel plant because it's not, you're losing money on it. You can't do that. We're the government. We say no. You figure.
Oh, yeah. That's stupid. Yeah, no, I disagree with that. I know he's doing that, but I just think that's a really bad decision to get involved with business. But anyway, I just real quick wanted to give you my idea on what I think fair is. I think it's perfectly fair. You can't get any more fair than a percent, an even percentage for no matter who it is. And no matter what you're buying.
Well, when you're considering where to move, there are, some states, of course, we know have no income tax, but there are states that do have an income tax and they operate a flat tax. Even some, blue states, Illinois, for example, I believe still has a flat tax. So the Democrats have tried to do away with it, but they can't. The people there like it too much. So this is actually an idea that a lot of people are behind. So you're not alone. Anyway, thanks for the call.
Okay, thank you. Take it. Bye.
Let's grab a quick commercial, and then we'll be talking with Mark on the Charles Freedman program.
It's high time to celebrate the opening of the new Hook Outlet Dispensary, 1129 Mission in Santa Cruz. Get in on the opening fun and really low prices on the Hook's unmatched selection of top-quality medical and recreational cannabis flower, vapes, drinks, gummies, and concentrates. The Hook Outlet is now the West Side's source for finest cannabis at the lowest prices. Get in on all the opening fun and low prices at the all-new Hook Outlet. HookOutlet.com for details and deals.
If you turned 65 recently like me, it's important you find a Medicare Advantage plan that gives you the coverage you're looking for. But finding one can be difficult. The best thing I did, and I suggest you do the same, is call a licensed insurance agent and let them walk you through your Medicare Advantage plan options. There are so many benefits you have access to, so make the call now and let the representatives explain everything to you. Our licensed insurance agents can offer you a variety of Medicare Advantage plans. Plus, the call is free, the information is free, and there's no obligation to enroll. We're here to make it easy for you to select a Medicare Advantage plan that may work for your needs. Finding a Medicare Advantage plan can be easy if you do what I did. Make a quick call right now to learn more. Thank you.
800-850-5360. 800-850-5360. 800-850-5360. That's 800-850-5360.
Attention content producers. You can have access to a complete digital media production facility at Satellite Co-working and Digital Media Studio on Soquel Avenue. Easily rent video and audio equipment, a studio with green screen, editing suite, and audio booth, all at can't say no rates. Schedule a tour to see for yourself at satellitecoworking.com. Mention Santa Cruz Voice for 20% off your first reservation.
And as advertised, we now bring Mark along. Thank you very much, sir, for your patience. Welcome to the program. It says here you want to talk about censorship. Are you for it or against it?
Well, I'm generally against it. Just to touch on your previous comments on a flat tax, great idea. I've got to keep in mind that like 50% of the U.S. population pays no income tax, so it's hard to bring them on board. What censorship, it's kind of an ironic event happened locally here last weekend, happened in Watsonville. And after Donald Trump got elected, they had these large rallies, grassroots public rallies on Ocean Street by the courthouse, had them in Watsonville.
Mark, I'm going to interrupt you for a second to tell you that you're bouncing in and out, and we're missing part of your transmission. So if you can possibly, stick your head a little further out the window or whatever, but back up a sentence or two, and please begin again.
Well, I'm driving down Highway 1, and for some reason, AT&T on their cell coverage has totally collapsed here locally, and the service areas are very limited. Can you read me at all?
You're coming in better now. Go ahead and make the presentation you were going to make.
Okay, I'll pull over to the east here and hopefully get a better cell signal. Anyhow, after Donald Trump was elected, they had a group called No Kings. They had big rallies here locally in Santa Cruz, in Watsonville, Monterey. And the issue was that Trump was going to be a dictator and fascism and be a king. And that group somewhat petered out. So now they've been replaced with a group called Indivisible. And their point of contention with the administration is censorship. That the Trump administration's coming down and censoring Jimmy Kimmel, library books, and on and on and on. And the irony here locally is that they had a rally in Watsonville Plaza. You're familiar with that place, right?
Sure.
Okay, do you remember what happened to George Washington in Watsonville Plaza.
Yeah, the city council took him away.
And bought a sculpture of George Washington several years ago and placed it in Watsonville Plaza. Well, that statue got removed. It got censored. And I don't know where it is right now. But that's because George Washington was unacceptable by the local politicians. So here they are protesting censorship, where I could not find a more egregious example of censorship. But I guess that fell through the cracks.
Well, see, what you're pointing out here is the real problem with censorship, which has always been this. Censorship is only practicable when I am doing the censoring, when I can decide what is appropriate for people to see and hear, and neither you nor anybody else gets to do that. So this is an argument of why censorship has fallen to the ground in the past, is because people see this and they're not willing to come up with any infinitely just and all-knowing and all-seeing arbiter. I guess if you could make Karnak the Magnificent the censor, that would work. But again, he's a fictitious character. So the censorship rabbit hole is one we don't want to go down. And there's a far cry, I must admit, between, they call about books. Primarily, conservatives now are attempting to protect young people from material that is inappropriate for youngsters of their age. There's a big difference between protecting children from inappropriate materials and censoring things for adults. Those are two entirely different concepts.
Well, to tie in on that, the local libraries in the county, they're going to have meetings this month, and it's going to deal with book banning. And I totally agree with you. There are books that are inappropriate at grade levels for children. In fact, they cannot be read out loud passages at school board meetings because they're inappropriate for adults. But there are 6 Dr. Seuss books that they've determined are inappropriate for children, and they have been removed from school libraries and county libraries, and children can't access them. And, I find Dr. Seuss somewhat of a paragon of children's literature, and to censor his books I find just ridiculous.
Not that long ago, I found an article somewhere on that, and it actually showed excerpts from the some of the works of Theodore Geisel. That's Dr. Seuss. That's his real name, Theodore Geisel. Great cartoonist. And essentially, they're upset because, some of these were wartime cartoons, and they depict the Germans and the Japanese in very uncomplimentary ways. Well, imagine that. We're at war with the bastards. You don't exactly, deify the people who are out there who are trying to kill you and whom you're trying to kill. But, modern people, they don't understand that, no, I don't know anything about that. Maybe they don't understand that we fought World War II. That's altogether possible if they went to the public schools. The other thing I found was, what should I say? Outdated stereotypes as to race and ethnicity. People of, Eskimos depicted in a certain way, Orientals depicted in a certain way, Negroes depicted in a certain way, and all of these were very much, part of the background of the times. I can understand why today some people would say, it's unfortunate that went on, and not want young people to see and duplicate these memes. That at least makes some sense. But gee whiz, the idea of discarding entire volumes because of this seems rather extreme.
Well, yeah, I think it's a lesson for the kids to learn where we've progressed since 1938 or 39, or when he wrote, I went to the zoo. And, I just watched Steamboat Around the Bend movie, because of the steamboat races. They're supposed to be on Mississippi. They're on the Sacramento River, and it was just amazing. But one of the actors in that movie was Stephen Fetchit. And again, the depiction I didn't find insulting. It was just
it's comic.
How they depicted Stephen.
That's
a very good word on it.
It is a comic depiction. The performer, his real name was Lincoln Perry. Lincoln Perry was one of the wealthiest men in Hollywood. He owned a fine home, was chauffeured around in a car, and he had white servants in his home and driving his automobile. So, Lincoln Perry was laughing all the way to the bank. And, essentially, he was asked about this years later. He said, hey, I had the ability to portray this character. People would pay for it. And I was going to make the money and support myself and my family. And he also, was a man who believed in, doing good charitable work, etc. But Stephen Fetchit is, once again, a character out of time. Steamboat Round the Bend also features Will Rogers, doesn't it?
It was filmed right before he died. It's an excellent movie.
Yeah, that's Fox Films had Will Rogers under contract to make pictures. A number of them feature Rogers and Stephen Fetchit together. Rogers was a man who accorded respect to people of all creeds. And the two of them do comic bits together, and they're funny. They play off each other, but it's all for laughs.
Well, it'd be the same thing with Stan Laurel. I mean, how did he present himself as a character? And I find it somewhat similar. But I recommend anyone to watch Steamboat Around the Bend. It's 1935, and it was released right after Will Rogers' plane crash. It's kind of sad, but very much fun to watch. But so on censorship down on Watsonville Plaza, let's ban it and let's bring George Washington back. I miss the statue.
Well, I'd prefer to not censor, to hold censorship to a dead minimum. I want everybody's voice to be heard. The idea that there are certain things that are inappropriate for children, that obviously is another matter entirely. But the idea that certain entertainments and things should be simply proscribed, no, I'm not for that. And that means that there's plenty of stuff out there that absolutely nauseates me, but that I feel should be freely available to whoever wants to see it.
Yeah, again, let's honor our founding father and put him back in the park and not censor George Washington. I mean, then have a rally about censorship. The irony is overwhelming.
Ew, what a hypocrite.
Thank you, Charles.
Thank you for the call, Mark. Appreciate it. Interesting how we had 3 calls from people in this third hour. That doesn't always happen, but really interesting presentations, too. Let me see. I've got, quarter of an hour left. Time for your phone call if you decide to join the erudite and informed people who have made their views known today. 831-265-5050, 831-265-5050 is the telephone number, and you are welcome to make a call. Let us know what you think. There's a meme nowadays, the idea that somehow political violence is some kind of brand new thing. Well, there's a piece today that I'd like to share with you. I'd like to share it with myself. From the American Mind, publication of the Claremont Institute, mob violence is fatal to Republican government. 20-year-old loner Thomas Matthew Crooks ascended a sloped roof in Butler County, Pennsylvania, and opened fire. He unlaunched a torrent of cliches. Commentators and public figures avoided the term assassination attempt, even if the AR-15 was trained at the head of a then former president. Instead, they condemned political violence. There's absolutely no place for political violence in our democracy, former President Obama said. 1 year later, he added the word despicable to his condemnation of the assassin who killed Charlie Kirk. That was an upgrade from 2 weeks prior, when he described the shooting in an Annunciation Catholic school by a transgender individual as merely unnecessary. Anyone fluent in post-9/11 rhetoric knows that political violence is the domain of terrorists and lone wolf ideologues whose manifestos will soon be unearthed by federal investigators, deciphered by the high priests of our therapeutic age, and debated by partisans on cable TV. The attempt to reduce it to the mere atomized individual is a modern novelty. From the American Revolution to the Civil War, from the 1863 draft riots to the 1968 Martin Luther King riots, from the spring of Rodney King to the summer of George Floyd, there's a long history of Americans resorting to violence to achieve political ends by way of mob action. Since the January 6th riot that followed the 2020 election, the left has persistently attempted to paint the right as particularly prone to mob action. But as the online response to the murder of Charlie Kirk demonstrates, with thousands of leftists openly celebrating the gory public assassination of a young father, the vitriol that drives mob violence is endemic to American public discourse and a perpetual threat to order. Before we pass this point, I have received an email communication or two, and I've actually read pieces. Some of the documents now being released, former FBI documents, etc., released by Director Kash Patel, point to the presence of a significant number of FBI agents in the January 6th Capitol riot. I have never doubted that this was part of the mix. After all, at that time, the FBI was under, was still, what should I say, going rogue in some aspects. I mean, they still had people. What was that guy? God, I can't remember his name now. Difficult to pronounce, but nevertheless, he's still an FBI agent. So the idea that they would look askance at this. Well, Trump calling all those people to the Capitol on that day and haranguing them the way he did. I mean, essentially, he's getting down his hands and knees and begging for trouble. And the FBI was there to attempt to facilitate that trouble. Nobody comes out of this looking that good, except for the people who attended the rally and yet did not participate in any of the illegal actions. And that actually constituted a good-sized share of the crowd, by far the majority. But for those people who, the complaint is, well, FBI agents fomented this. Well, that's the same as, but Johnny did it. As conservatives, we are believers in individual responsibility. You can't control your neighbor's behavior. Can't control the other guy's behavior. But you, by God, can control your own, and you are responsible for doing so. It would satisfy me greatly if all of the people in the Capitol building that day, painting themselves blue and tap dancing on Nancy Pelosi's desk, if every single one of them turned out to be an FBI agent. Wouldn't that be heaven on earth? Oh, I would love that. But unfortunately, that was not what occurred. Now, one thing that, this has been, 20 years now since that? Oh, no, it's 2020. So it's been 4 or 5 years since that episode. Donald Trump learned something from that. You see, that backfired so badly and besmirched both Mr. Trump and his followers so badly that he has never since done anything like that again. Now, it takes a while for that to be noticeable because Mr. Trump, is not the sort of person who will say, that wasn't such a good idea. Maybe I shouldn't have done that. It's unheard of for him to draw attention to a faux pas by making an apology. That he does not do. But for him to, in his own mind, simply decide, that didn't work out very well. I won't do it again. And then not do it again. And count on the event to slip further and further into memory. But unfortunately, the point that's made in this paragraph is accurate. That among the other negative effects of that blunder was that it gave people on the left something they could point to and say, hey, look, there was a MAGA riot in the Capitol. Of course, they try to blow it up into an insurrection or something like that. That's just nuts. But it was a riot. And any attempt to denigrate that or say, oh, well, no, it was just a few people acting up. No, it was a riot in the Capitol building. Disgraceful, unpardonable, disgusting. Of all the mistakes Donald Trump has ever made in public life, and there have been a number over the past 10 years, that was by far the most egregious. And again, in all fairness, he has not repeated it. But, these FBI agents, obviously they hated his guts. They're there to try to take a bad situation and make it worse. When a guy comes up and says, hey, I want to hang you, the last thing you do is hand him a rope. Anyway, just a momentary and sidebar reaction there. We have had some people call and remind me or bring to my attention that there were FBI agents present at that debacle. Yes, there were, and I know that. Doesn't excuse anyone. Okay. Meanwhile, back in August of 1786, a violent insurrection ripped through the peaceful countryside of Massachusetts. After the end of the Revolutionary War, many American soldiers were caught with debts on one side and a government unable to make back pay on the other. A disgruntled former officer in the Continental Army named Daniel Shays led a rebellion aimed at breaking this vice at gunpoint. Commotions of this sort, like snowballs, gather strength as they roll if there is no opposition in the way to divide and crumble them, wrote George Washington in a letter, striking a serene tone in the face of an insurrection. James Madison was less forgiving. In all very numerous assemblies of whatever character composed, passion never fails to wrest the scepter from reason. Had every Athenian citizen been a Socrates, and every Athenian assembly would still have been a mob. He wrote in Federalist 55, inspired by Shays' rebellion and seeking to rein in the excesses of democracy. Lawmakers called the Constitutional Convention in the summer of 1787. The Constitution of the United States was born out of political chaos. Why does current moment strike so many as distinctly perilous? Classic political philosophy offers us a clearer answer to this question than modern psychoanalysts. The most pointed debate among philosophers through the centuries has centered on how to prevent mob violence and ensure the most unnatural of things, political order. In Plato's Republic, the work that stands at the headwaters of the Western tradition of political philosophy, Socrates argues that the only truly just society is one in which philosophers are kings and kings are philosophers. As a rule, democracy devolves into tyranny because mob rule inevitably breeds impulsive citizens who become focused on petty pleasures. The resulting disorder eventually becomes so unbearable that a demagogue arises promising to restore order and peace. The classically educated founders picked up on these ideas, mediated through Aristotle, Cicero, John Locke, and Montesquieu, among others. They developed the structure of America's new government. The Constitution's mixed government was explicitly designed to establish a political order that would take into consideration the sentiments and interests of people without yielding to mob rule at the expense of order. The founders took for granted that powerful elites would necessarily be interested in upholding the regime from which they derived their authority. History has often seen disaffected elites stoke insurrections in order to defenestrate a ruling class that shut them out of political life. The famous case of the Catilinarian conspiracy in the late Republican Rome, which a disgruntled aristocrat named Catiline attempted to overthrow the Republic during the consulship of Cicero, serves as a striking example. In the 21st century, we face a different phenomenon. Those in power are not only failing to enforce order, but also excusing and even actively promoting conditions that undermine a peaceful, stable, and orderly regime. The points of erosion are numerous. Public cheerleading of assassinations can be dismissed as noise from the rabble, but it's more difficult to ignore numerous calls from elites for civic conflagration. Newspapers are promoting historically dubious revisionism that underlines the moral legitimacy of the Constitution. Billionaire-backed prosecutors declined to prosecute violent crime. For years, those in power at best ignored, at worst encouraged, mob-driven chaos in American social life, resulting in declining trust in institutions, lowered expectations for basic public order, coarsened or altogether discarded social mores, and a general sense on all sides that Western civilization is breaking down. The United States, of course, has faced far more robust political violence than what we have today. But even during the Civil War, brutal by any standard, a certain civility tended to obtain between combatants. As Abraham Lincoln noted in his second inaugural, both sides read the same Bible and pray to the same God. Even in the midst of a horrific war, a shared sense of ultimate things somewhat tempered the disorder, and destruction, and crucially promoted a semblance of reconciliation once the war ended. Our modern disorder runs deeper. The shuttering of fundamental shared assumptions about virtually anything leaves political opponents looking less like fellow citizens to be persuaded and more like enemies to be subdued. Charlie Kirk, despite his relative political moderation and his persistent willingness to engage in attempts at persuasion, continues to be smeared by many as a Nazi propagandist. Willful refusal to distinguish between the mostly run-of-the-mill American conservatism and the murderous foreign ideology known as National Socialism is telling. The implication is not subtle. If you disagree with me, you are my enemy, and I am justified in cheering your murder. Fellow citizens who persistently view their political opponents as enemies and existential threats cannot exist long in a political community that's shared. Democracy is on the ballot, the popular refrain goes, but rarely is democracy undermined by a single election. It is undermined instead by gradual decline in public spiritedness and public virtue, as well as a loss of social trust and good faith necessary to avoid violence. The chief prosecutors against institutional authority are not disaffected Catalans, but the ruling class itself. This arrangement may work for a while, but both political theory and common sense suggest it is volatile and unlikely to last for long. Political order in general, requires a degree of virtue, public spiritedness, and goodwill among the citizenry. In Federalist 55, James Madison comments of all the permutations of government that have yet been conceived, Republican government is dependent upon order and institutional legitimacy. As there is a degree of depravity in mankind which requires a certain degree of circumspection and distrust, so there are other qualities in human nature which justify a certain portion of esteem and confidence. Republican government presupposes the existence of these qualities in a higher degree than any other form. I must stop there, but I urge you to read the rest of this yourself. You'll find it real clear. Politics Today. Go down to the morning report and look for the founders understood the threat of mob violence. See you later. Okay. I think that's about it for that. Well, oh geez. Excuse me.